Hey everybody, Jeff Goldberg here. Good to see you all again virtually. For those that don't know me, I'm a photographer based out here in Boulder, Colorado. I've been using Evoto now for a while, um, and I'm one of those people that like almost every day I go on and check for updates and see what new features are coming our way. So I'm pretty happy about how fast new things are coming. And so you might even see something in a video today that is already a new feature for, just wasn't here today. So if you want to get a hold of me to ask me any questions from the video or something you saw, please reach out. You can see my contact information. I'll put it right about there. So you can just see my contact information and reach out. So the goal today is Evoto had asked me to share with all of you how I create sort of artistic looking portraits, or what some people might call cinematic portraits. And for me, what that really comes down to is creating a situation where there's some drama in the lighting. Either probably most common, but most common would be creating some significant shadows. And so there's some sense of something happening or some sense of something moving from one side of the frame to the other. So there's always a brighter part and a darker part, and you'll see that in some of the examples. The opposite can be true too, where it's completely monochrome, almost shot in color, but looks almost monochrome. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of both of those. But what I said was it's hard to explain. You don't really edit that in. That's there from the beginning with the actual shot. So I want to take people from, if I'm going to show you how you edit for that, I want to take you through from a little tiny bit, just some behind the scenes pictures of how I set up the shot. So you kind of get a sense of what it was like in camera versus what it was like, just seeing the, sort of phone picture of the behind the scenes. Then I'm going to jump in and show you a quick, my workflow and just how I move back and forth between Lightroom and Evoto. And so we'll do a quick demo of that and then some live editing. And so I'm going to take a couple of these examples and show you how I'd edit them, how far I go in Evoto, and then what cleanup I do, subsequently from there. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. Here's my very first example, and really it's a good example of a very, very simple setup, but to create some of that cinematic look or dramatic look or artistic, whatever words we're going to use. In short, you can see on the left is the photo I took on my phone, and the one on the right is straight out of camera before we've applied any edits. So you can see on the left, it's kind of an interesting structure. We're inside of a band shell. There's some natural light and shadows, and she is placed in the shadow. And the reason we do that is because the idea here is your eye is going to look at the brightest, sharpest thing first, right? You can see in the picture on the right, you can see that she is the brightest and sharpest thing in the photo, so your eye is naturally drawn there. But if you look at the difference between the left and the right, there's just the contrast isn't there. And so this is the simplest setup, one light. I actually have a reflector, a grid, and a little bit of diffuser on the end, just to kind of give a little spotlight effect in the middle of this band shell. So that's a very easy example of how we can create some of that cinematic look. And you can see if I zoom in, it's very clean. Not a ton to do. You can see there's some hair there. So we'll play with some of the hair edit function in Evoto and just see how well that cleans it up versus what we have to clean up afterwards in something like Photoshop. So let's move on to the next example. In this next example, you can see the setup on the left is equally simple. Now we've gone indoors, so we're inside the studio. And I have a softbox with a grid, sort of 45 degrees to the subject's right in front of her. And what I like to do is ask them to point their nose at the edge of the light, sort of right here. What that does is it allows there to be a nice wash of light across the face. You get the Rembrandt effect. You see a little triangle of light here. It just has a very pleasing look. And then sort of a judgment call based on me or the client I'm working with, or maybe someone else who's directing it, is how much light to put on the far side. In this case, she liked a lot. So we added, and I didn't have this right in the behind the scenes, so I just put a little icon here. But exactly opposite, so 45 degrees behind and to her left, I added a smaller light, bare bulb with a small grid, just to kind of give this kiss of light on the side of her face and on her shoulder to separate her a little bit more from the background. You can see studio lights were on, no special background, just a painted sort of off-white wall, but there was enough separation between her and the wall to let the background go dark. And this is good, so you can see one of the challenges with light from the side is it emphasizes every little bump, crevice, wrinkle, etc. So straight out of camera it may not be the most flattering, but that's what we're going to go through and edit. What I actually did afterwards, just to show you, was I took the exact same setup, took the second light away, so just move the front one forward, try to keep the pose exactly the same, and this is what it looks like. So no changes to camera settings, anything like that. We just kind of moved the light forward, took the grid off so we have a wider spread of light. So now it's sort of in front of her and a little bit higher, just high enough that I can get underneath it to create a little difference. We still have shadows. I didn't want it to go pure white, so you can still see there's a shadow side and a bright side. You can still see the catch lights now have moved straight from the side to a little bit overhead. And you can just see when the light's straight in front, it just sort of flattens things out and smooths things out. Not saying one is better or better than the other. It's just very simple, same pose, slightly different lighting position, different level of editing requirements. So we'll jump in and do a quick edit on both of these so you can see it. Let's go with one final setup example. Okay, so here this is a little bit more complicated, but I wanted to kind of show you a building on a little bit of, so we start off with the one light from the side to give that separation. Then we went with a little bit of the two lights to add a little bit of okay, so here's the next one. And this one's the same basic principles we've been talking about in the other two examples. It's just a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to zoom in for a second. So over here you can see we have sort of this key light, same thing, same softbox with the grid, 45 degrees to her left. Over here we have a gray background with a gelled light blue to kind of create that blue background. We just have some more lights in the back shooting at the floor because we thought it was too dark. And you can see, here's me laying on the ground, very unflattering, but there I am. And you can see that there's nothing on the floor. It's not overly polished, there's no water, but with a tile floor, any kind of linoleum, tile, wood that has just a tiny bit of sheen, if you get your camera down on the ground, it's going to create some sort of reflection. In this case, sort of a fuzzy reflection, which I liked. Now you'll see, if you look at the image on the right, which is again straight out of camera, you'll see problems. We have a gap in the backdrop at the top. You know, we're a little bit of I was laying on the ground, so we ran out of room. You can see her dress has some wrinkles around the edges, which would be nice to get rid of. There's some excess wrinkles in the background back there. So there's a number of things that we would want to clean up, and I'll show you a couple different ways that we can think about that. So with the same setup, I'm gonna show you two different examples. So this is where you see her face is fully lit. There is clearly a shadow side, but it's much more even. Her face is completely lit. We can change that simply by moving the light to the side, so it's more coming at her from the side. You can see in this example here where it's coming more straight at her from the side. Everything else is pretty much the same. You can just see some separation here between the two layers of background. And now you get a much more defined shadow across her face to the darker side, her hands in shadow. It's just adding a little bit more drama. And you can see for the most part, this image is pretty clean. She's beautiful skin, so there's not a lot to fix there. The beauty mark we're not going to change. The dress has a little fold I didn't notice when we're shooting, but other than that, pretty straightforward. So we'll run that through the editing process and see what we like. So with that, let's jump into workflow. Okay, so let me take a minute to explain my workflow. And again, I would say this is, this may or may not work for you. You have to kind of take it in and make something that works for you specifically, but this works for me. And I use this process at least once a day, usually several times a day, and I found it works very well for my needs. So let me kind of walk you through the steps, and we're going to do it live, but just so you understand the steps and maybe the reason why. Okay, so the first thing is I take everything out of camera and drop it straight into Lightroom. And this, so this is sort of the home repository, if you will. And the very first step is making the selections. What are we going to edit? And I have many different ways to do this. Sometimes I do it myself straight in Lightroom. Sometimes the client does it. And when the client does it, I use a different tool to kind of move the catalog back and forth. So I create an online read-only catalog that they can create selection lists from. So I use that. So once we get down to the selections, Evoto has the capability to read a Lightroom catalog. The challenge is to read and write the catalog needs to be closed. And I might be doing multiple things at one time. I don't want to close Lightroom. So there's a workaround for this, which is to create a new Lightroom catalog, sort of this step, from just my selections to communicate with Evoto. And that's what we're going to do. Once we're in Evoto, I really focus on the initial develop settings, so say sharpness and contrast, basic things like that. I don't do that in Lightroom. The first step where that's applied is on the raw files is in Evoto. I have an initial preset, which is largely focused on those basic develop settings, and then my most commonly used blemish, skin smoothing, background settings. So it's not perfect straight out of the application, but it gets me pretty close, and I know where every picture is starting from to make the fine tuning from there. Once I'm done with all of that, I export all those files back into Lightroom. And what's very nice, so Evoto exports them back as a TIFF file and stacks them with the original raw file. Now you'll see in a minute when I do the demonstration, I didn't want to get into camera wars, so I converted my native camera format into a DNG, so we don't get into any of those debates. So really, I just kind of created those files for the purpose of the demo, but I use the actual straight raw files. Once I'm done with Evoto, sometimes there's things that you have to tweak in a little bit more of an advanced way. Maybe the background didn't clean up perfectly. Maybe we need to do some more very precise hair adjustments, maybe some generative fill. So whatever has to happen, I do that first. Right after I bring those files back into Lightroom, I directly edit those new TIFF files and make all those adjustments. Finally, any kind of lighting or color final adjustments I make. Sometimes you lighten the hair, maybe you tweak the background a little bit. I like to play with radial gradients. We'll see all those things. I do that in the final step. And then the same thing with, for whatever reason, I never shoot straight. It's always camera's a little bit off. I'm moving fast. I'm close, but I don't always get the perfect geometry. So I fix that in Lightroom, fix the crop, and then send it to a client. I know that was really fast. This is recorded, so you can go back and look at it. I'm also about to do it live in the tool. So I'm gonna go a little bit faster when I go through the demonstration, but all the steps are exactly the same as this diagram. Okay, so let's get started. I've already made the selections. I've already filtered for the selections. And so this is what I want to send to Evoto. Now, how you get here is you can use your own system. I like to use little white pick flags. I also, if I have lots of different things, let's say in one set we have some wide angle, some up close, maybe some environmental shots of where we're doing this. I like to tag what goes to Evoto, so it's my habit to always tag it blue. No rhyme or reason, I just like to use blue. So that's how I keep track. So anything that goes to Evoto is gonna have a select flag and it's gonna be tagged blue. And you'll see why, sort of later on. So the first step we talked about, once we have our selects, is to make a new catalog file. So if I select all of these and I go up here to File, Export as a Catalog, I like to keep them all in one spot. So we're gonna just create a new file here. So this is demo, let's just call it demo edits. Now down here, normally if I was sending this to a person or the computer, I might use some of these features to include the files, but here I don't want to include the files. I just want to include the names of the files that I'm going to edit, kind of where they are. That's the whole point of this, creating this file. So I'll click Export Catalog, and it creates the catalog. Now we're going to leave Lightroom for a second and hop over to Evoto. Okay, so here we are in Evoto, and we're going to create a new project. Now, the first thing that happens is when you create this new project is Evoto will give us a choice. Do we want to import images and folders? This would be very useful if you're directly importing from a card, or maybe you've half processed the files in another tool and you want to import them here. That works great. But the way I like to do it is with the function of the Lightroom catalog files. So you just click on that. And let's go to where we save those, and we called it demo edits. Open that up. And if you're unfamiliar with Evoto, this is the standard import screen. There's lots of things you can do to filter and things like that, which we don't need to do because I've already kind of gone through that process. So for me, I just do a quick check to make sure it looks right. So there's 6 files, that seems great. So let's import all of those. And it creates this new project for us with our 6 files. This was the one we didn't talk about in behind the scenes, but I wanted to work on this one from an edit for a specific reason, which we'll come to in a minute. So what I like to do, like I said, I like to start. So let's go back to the very first one we looked at, which is this file. I have a very nicely named Start Here preset, and you'll see it says combination. So there's a combination of basic developments settings in there, as well as some of, like I said, some of the blemish removal and other things. So let's walk through that in a second. So if I click on it, okay, it applies all of that. I'm going to come back to a couple things in a second. So just to show you, so here in color adjustments, I have my very basic adjustments, which kind of helps just play with expanding the range a little bit. I have some details set to get some initial sharpening, so it's just however you want to kind of take a look at that and see how you like it and kind of tweak from there. But if I zoom in real close, like, it's plenty sharp. I'm not adding sharpening to it. It might have a touch, too much color, so maybe I will take my vibrance from positive to negative just to kind of tune it in like that. Okay, but otherwise I'm not making any other changes here right now. To me, it looks exactly the way I'd expect it to look, basically straight out of camera. So if we go over here, right, this is where the magic happens on the portrait retouching. Okay, and I'm just going to run through this just so you can see it before we get to the actual impact. So I always kind of start with a medium. So this says freckles and acne, but it really shouldn't say acne as much as like bumps, because it works really well on a lot of the bumps. Dark circles and eye bags I set to 50, which I'm going to call medium. Lip wrinkles I set to medium. I don't have double chin on by default. And actually, I actually like the double chin a lot, even for people that don't really have a double chin. It just sort of sharpens the jawline a little bit, especially if you're shooting low. Body blemishes, this one's an interesting one for me. So this one I go back and forth on, but I start off as medium, but oftentimes I bring that down to bring back moles and things like that that are for them natural. Armpits, the one thing I go to 100 because when it works, I like it when it's at 100. On the skin smoothing, I really over-index on the sculpting. I just like how it looks. On the body scan, I like how the frequency separation looks. Also, this is leftover from before when we didn't have more options, but I just like how it looks. And then lastly, I'm a big fan of the AI Unify functions. So on the face, it sort of smooths out all of the color and kind of evens it out. Then on the body, it does the same and also matches the body a little bit more to the face. So it's a much more even transition, like in this case, from top to bottom. So I'm gonna come back to some other settings in a second, but that's the basic preset. So if I zoom in, so you can see, here's before. If you focus on her face, here's after, before, after. You can see it does a good job kind of smoothing it. Maybe this is a style thing. If there's too much shine right there, we can go back up here, zoom, 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 where it says reduce face shine, and we can just kind of crank that up around 50 and see how we like it. Pretty good, maybe a little more, something like that. Looks great. Now, you'll see the background looks a little weird. It sort of smoothed it out. And so that's because by default, I have clean background on. It has detected, it can't fix distractions because that's good. I'm gonna turn that off anyways because it's not a clean background. Now, when it went to cleaning the background, it actually, for whatever reason, decided it was there. And if you zoom in, it really cleaned up the plywood. Now, that's a style question if you like that cleanup the way it is or not. So for now, I'm gonna say I kind of like it, just for something different. Let's see how it looks on the ground. So you can see its definition of where the ground is interesting. It's not quite where the ground is, but pretty close. And so I like having a very clear separation here between wall and the ground, right? So that's probably pretty clean. I'm not gonna go more than that. Kind of gives it a little bit of a dreamy kind of look. I didn't lose. If I go full here for a second, if I go all the way up there, look, I lost the line here. I lost the boundaries at the bottom. So I'm gonna clean that up a little bit. Let's go back down to where we had it. A little more. You can see I'm being really precise right now. But something like that, I think looks really good. It's looking really dramatic. Now, if it's too smooth, we can just go in and mask it out. And I think it's a little bit smooth on the actual, I think it's a little bit smooth on the edges, like where the ground meets. So I'm just gonna do that. And to me, that just looks more natural with keeping the clean we had from the other ones. You can see here, we lost a little bit of this line up here, so maybe I'll go back in. Very soft brush. I'm gonna take the flow down so I don't do too much, and let's just see, kind of like that. So it's still better. It's still softer, but I don't lose that detail. So it was very simple, right? So here's before, here's after, before, after. So that's pretty cool. Right, so the only thing that it didn't do so far, actually we did a little, is this hair here. Okay, so the last thing, and I'm not gonna go into this much detail with all of them, but just so we kind of get into it on the first one, if we look at hair, and we go to stray hair removal, I'm gonna crank it. And it does two things, right? So we have the beyond the figure, so which is all around the edge, right? Which is pretty hard to see since we changed so much, but there's some stray hairs here. It actually does a very good job kind of keeping with that dreamy look of blending that into the background. Within the figure, if I go to 0, I'm really aiming for this hair here. Let's just see what it does. So it did a good job on the neck, but it kind of missed the face. That's okay. We'll just clean that up in Photoshop later. The last thing I'm gonna do is this electric outlet. I don't really love this electric outlet. So I'm gonna use the healing tool Make it a little bigger. I'm just using the bracket, the right bracket key to make it bigger. Paint right over it, gone. And there we go. So like that looks amazing. So you can see we've got a lot of attention on her, some heavy shadows, and we're gonna finish the rest of this when we get back to Lightroom. So let me do another one. Okay, so here's one that I did not have the behind the scenes on because I forgot to take it. But I wanted to show you the same sort of background features because it's so amazing and so helpful. So this is a very simple studio shot, white seamless paper. The lights are at 245s to either side, which you can tell from the legs here. But look at how messy the floor is. As best I can, I never can keep it clean. So it gets messy in every shoot. So there's all kind of fuzz and foot marks. Up here, we've got where the roll of paper came down. So it's just messy. It's just messy. Right, so you remember the same, I haven't changed my presets from the last ones. The very same one, I just click it. Okay, and the most obvious thing you see right away, before, after, is the impact of the background cleanup. So this time it auto-detected that there was a background and that I wanted it cleaned. Right, so that saves me so much time. So then if you look at the floor here, before, look at fuzzy, foot mark, fuzzy, after, gone. Now we have some lingering. You can see it's sort of a brown ring at the bottom, the same as at the top, because I was using a grid to kind of keep the light focused. So that's the edge of the lighting. It didn't go that far. And it's a style thing at this point, if we like it or not. If you don't like it, there's a new-ish feature with Evoto to unify lighting, which is going to try to take this top to bottom lighting and make it more even. So let me hit that and look at that. So before, after, it's amazing, right? So that one now looks super, super clean. We still got a little bit of touch up to do down here, but otherwise very, very clean. If it's too bright, you can kind of bring that back down somewhere like that. That to me looks about right. You know, you can go more. Before, after, that looks really, really good. Right, I mean, obviously she looks good too, but this is just the same presets we had before. Maybe I'd go a little bit heavier. Again, I don't like to call it acne because I think it's misinterpreting it, but like with the bumps, get rid of more bumps. Kind of like that. Boom, perfect. Now, you can see there's a bit of hair here. Not a problem. Easy to use our healing tool, left bracket to make it smaller. Just kind of zap it. Gone. Perfect. There's another one down here. So I can do the same thing. Just kind of take with the healing tool. Gone. One here. Gone. Just like that. Just like that. Now for me, this is a little bit of a messier image, but I like that look, so I'm not doing anything with the hair, I'm leaving that off. Right, so for me, that's done enough for Evoto. We'll just go fix the rest in a minute in Lightroom or Photoshop. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so this is one where we had the background. Again, same preset, didn't change anything. Before, after, before, after. So this is a good example to see some of the armpit cleanup. The skin already was very nice, so it's just a little bit of change under the eyes, right? And that's probably about it. Like the pores look great. I don't know if we want to get more. There is some, you know, you can see the lines here, some of the smile lines. You know, sometimes I try right here and see if it works. If not, I just clean it up in the next step. That looks pretty good. Boom, done. Looks great. Down here, again, a judgment call. I'm gonna come back to this one later because this, I don't know how far I wanna go, and I like to use layers in Photoshop to kind of look at that. The other thing is you can see there's a transition here that's a little bit harsh, but I'm not gonna worry about that here. I'm gonna worry about that in Photoshop later. But that's as far as I would go. Right, so now, same pose, remember? Same preset. Boom. It's beautiful. Same basic thing. So I'm not going to change. Actually, there's one little bit of skin here, one little crease. We'll just zap that, zap that, zap that. Good. Okay, now again, this is a style thing. The neckline's very, very natural here. But you know, some people would work on that. So let's just take the neck wrinkle line to halfway. Something like that. So I don't want to get rid of it completely, but just a little bit less noticeable. She'll probably appreciate that. And then you can see there's a clip in the hair. You know, so again, I'll just go to the remove tool, see how it does. Perfect. Now, if you don't like that, just back it out and we can do it in a different tool. So there's many ways that we can attack that. I actually like how, I think it's gonna like how I can't speak right now. I think I like how it will turn out with some generative fill more, so I'll do it in Photoshop. But that one looks great. Remember, here's the one just before it. Also looks great. Just very different styles. Okay, let's go to these last two. So this one. Okay, so we'll do this one first. Right, so remember, I always start with my preset. Looks really good. I can turn off these background things because there's no solid background. But what's new here, so she looks great. What's new here, we talked about it before, there's some wrinkling in the dress. So if I come over here and crank, I'm gonna go from 0 to 100, it sort of smooths out the dress and gives a little bit more of a silky feel. So it wasn't that type of material to have that feel, but this look, when you take out those wrinkles, it just has that look. And it's interesting to have that smoothness against the coarseness of the screen behind her. So I love how that looks. So again, before, after, looks great. Right, so everything else, like the mess up here and down here, I'll fix later. These easy ones, like the little dust bunnies, I'll just zap them here because it's so fast to do it here. If you see them, to just zap them. For that matter, you could zap these wrinkles in the cloth. Same basic way. Might as well get the easy ones out of, whoops, that one didn't work. Control Z or Command Z since I'm on a Mac today. Kind of just clean that up a little bit. Okay, that looks great. Right now I can go here, start here, same thing. So she looks amazing. Before, after. Don't need any more changes there. You can see the drapes aren't straight. We'll fix that, but that's the gist. So that's as far as I would go on these examples in Evoto. The next step is to export them. So I'm going to select them all. I'm going to hit export. You have a choice. I can export as an image, which I'm not going to do here. I want to export it back to the same Lightroom catalog file that I used on import. So if I click that, there's 6 pictures, so I know that. I want to go back to the original folder where it came from, right? I don't check either of these. It's a longer discussion on why. Original file name, I don't change any of this. I do it as a TIFF. And actually just here, if you click settings, you can see your color space. And for me, I'm still trying to preserve as much detail as I can. So I'm going with the Adobe RGB. If I was exporting straight away, I'd go to the sRGB, but I want a little bit more depth or color depth. So that's all I would do. I'd select all these and I would hit export. Once it's done, you certainly can see the progress here. Once it's done, we'll go back to Lightroom and import these new Evoto generated TIFFs into Lightroom. Here we are back in Lightroom where we have the original 6 files that we exported out. Now we're going to bring those, and you can see these are all DNGs. Now we're going to bring in what Evoto generated. Now what's happened at this point is Evoto has exported the TIFF files. They're sitting in the same directory as these files, but Lightroom doesn't know about it yet. So this is how we tell Lightroom. We import from another catalog. All right, here's the one we just used. And it brings up this. Now, the first thing you'll notice is we have 6 images, but it says 12. And that's because it also updated the original 6. And what it did was it stacked them. So you'll see here where it says new photos 6. So there are 6 new TIFF files. And my choice here is I want to add them to the catalog without moving. So I'm telling Lightroom, just add them to the catalog, don't move them anywhere. But the existing 6, I want to keep the metadata and develop settings, because this is really where we're telling, it's telling my main catalog, hey, I stacked these things. So I just click import. Now, what happens is, and I understand this is also somewhat depending on your setup, but for me, it's going to detect that there is a difference between the timing of what's now in Evoto and what was in the sidecar files when I exported. And I like to keep all the sidecar files. To me, that's always turned on. So it's pretty easy for me to just select all, click here, import settings from disk. So all that did was override the sort of the default settings with what was already sitting on the disk with the metadata of the original images, since we didn't change the name. So yes, this is a very arcane step. It probably is important that you have turning on the XMP writing in Lightroom, which I certainly can spend more details and show people more of the setup if interested. It is a little bit mechanical. I'm sure I could make some scripts and make this easier. It's just, for me, it's almost secondhand now, so it doesn't take me long to do it. Okay, so if I go back to where we were right here, I go to the selects, you will see now that there's a TIFF file stacked on top of a DNG. So my next step is I usually go here to metadata and I filter on file type, right? And we have 2 in this case, the DNGs, which are originals, and the TIFF. Often this would just say raw. So I select this, and you can see this is the second, the bottom of the stack for each one. What I do is I select all these and I turn off that flag. So now, and the reason I do that is my selects. If I want to look at just my selects, this is what I'm working on. If I want to look at all the files that were involved with Evoto, I click on blue and I can see the full stack. So that's just my thing for how I manage the files. But here we are, back at the selects. And let's just do a couple things. All right, because I think we talked about, let's go here. We had, now open it up in Photoshop. I want to edit the original. The issue we had here was just, whoops, a little far, was just some hair, right? Evoto did a great job on the neck. You can see there's some lingering effect. So I'm just going to use the remove tool here. Just kind of get that. Just kind of get that. I like to do it on its own layer in case something goes wrong. I can reverse it. Looks great. Okay, so now this is more complicated. So I can't just use the remove tool. I'm going to try generative fill and see how it goes. So let's just select it. And sometimes, whoops, it went a little crazy on me. Sometimes it's a little bit of a game, right, to see, wonder what Photoshop is going to do with this. So let's just find out. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. I'm even going to say remove stray hair. And we wait. Okay, so let's look at the different options. Very, very close. So I think I like this. I think I like this third option. And from here, it's so close, I might stop. You know, we could go further and do some more here, but you kind of get the idea. I would just work it until I liked it, but that looks really, really good. And I would just save it, flatten it, save it. And we are done with that one for Photoshop. Really finish it here back in Lightroom. To me, it's just a couple things. I like to have the background, so I do a background mask. I'm just gonna make it slightly cooler. Just gonna think that adds something to it. Now, it looks like it's still a little bright right here. So just pull this in a little bit, bring this down, and make this also a little bit cooler to kind of bring it all together. And that's about it. It looks really good. So I'd kind of stop there. All right, so that's that one. Let's look at these two. Or we'll pick one. We'll do them both real quick. Okay, so if we dig in here, the thing that we had left before was this clip. So let's do a generative fill on this clip. Now this one, I don't think I need to tell it anything. It should just match the hair texture. Let's give it a chance. We'll sing and dance for a second while it does its thing, and boom, it looks great. Yeah, I think I kind of like that with the brightest option. That's perfect. While I'm here, I see I missed a little bit of fuzz. So let's just fix the fuzz while we're here. And we scroll down, see if we want to fix anything else. Yeah, a little bit here, just one more fuzz. That's about it. So that looks great. So here we are in this one. And I'm not sure how much we need to change here, but it's worth looking. Very similar, obviously, to the last one. The clip is not in this one. Hair looks perfect. Skin looks realistic, so I'm not gonna change a lot in the skin. Maybe a couple small things here that we'll use. This, you know, little spot healing here. If I had seen it, I could have done this in Evoto, but I got a second shot here, just to clean up a little bit. But otherwise, I think it looks pretty good. I'm not gonna change it any further. All right, so back here in Lightroom, first off, on this one, I love the monochrome. Maybe we just crop it a little bit so we're a little bit tighter into the edge of her face, maybe get down to her eyes a little bit, kind of like that. I like it off center like that. To me, I just love it. And so I don't think I would change a whole lot more. This eye, the right eye, or sorry, the left eye to her, looks a little darker than the right eye. So let's change that. So they're kind of a little bit more balanced, kind of like that. There we go. I'm not going to play with this too much more. That looks great. Now I might go in and do some fine tuning on contrast and things, but otherwise I think that one looks great. Here, this is the one we're looking at. Remember, this is the side light going all the way back to our first discussion. So you have a lot more skin contrast. On the face, I really like it. On her body, I like it less. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a body skin mask. And the fact that it didn't get the rest of the tattoo, I don't care. I'm really more worried about the centerpiece, right? And I'm going to reduce the texture a lot. Something like that. Maybe that's too much. Just something like that. The focus is her face. It already was shot, you know, somewhat of a shallow depth of field. Now it's more, but I think I like that a lot. Again, from a cropping perspective, we're pretty much there. Maybe cut off the hair a bit to get a little more intimate of a portrait. Bring this up, kind of like that. And that looks really cool. I really like it. Very strong, bright to dark. Oh, I forgot. one of the things we were going to look at was that transition in her eye that I just noticed. So we were going to look at this transition. Again, I don't find, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing I don't like about the skin. I just think that transition is strong, and I wanted to smooth out that transition. So let's just give it a shot. Okay. Before, after. Different versions. See, I like that, where it just smooths out that transition just enough. It looks super natural. Back out. Look at these versions if we want more. I think I like that third version. Don't need more. We're good. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next one, on this. So this is easy. You can see the brown. First of all, if it's gonna be in the frame, it's pretty easy to kind of just take the background, maybe subtract out the real middle. I'll do the radial. Subtract out a radial gradients here to kind of get rid of, we don't want to mess too much with the middle of the picture. We're really more worried about the edges. So let's mask out the middle, kind of like this. Okay, so you remember we have this brownish color up there. There's some brownish color down here. I'm going to take some saturation away. I'm going to crank up some shadows, and it basically, the top part goes away. The bottom, pretty easy to use the Lightroom remove tool. Just kind of clean that up. Looks like it went a little further than I thought. Let it go. All right, now what's new in Lightroom? It'll tell me, hey, you gotta update your other stuff. Since you did that, fine, we'll do that. Now, this looks really cool. I like it off center. I'm always an off center kind of person, so I kind of like it like that. To me, that looks really good. And again, you can do whatever you want here. So we can go black and white, which I think this deserves. Maybe some higher contrast. And I find black and white very, very stark. So I like to apply a little bit of color toning to it just to put some warmth back. So it's still monochrome, but just has a hint, just a hint of warmth. And I love that. High contrast, looks great. So that's all I would do to that one. Okay, we have 2 to go. So looking at these 2, you kind of get the idea now on how these are going to go, because we've done very similar process. So for this one, the big challenge is the clothing. So it sort of popped out here more than we liked. And actually, I'm going to go all the way to her arm here and let Photoshop smooth it all out. So let's give Photoshop a chance to smooth out that fabric. Perfect. So here's a couple other options, but they're pretty similar. I'm going to go with the first one. All right, so if I move this out of the way, you can see before, after, perfect. The real fun on this one I want to play with is the background. I'm not changing anything about her. She looks perfect. So we'll come back and play with this in Lightroom. So let's save this one. All right, so on this one, same kind of things. You kind of see the process now. We have this gap up here. A lot of ways to fix this. A lot of ways to fix this. But I always want to start with the easiest. And the easiest would be to try the generative fill and see what it does. I may skip some of the other ones I would normally do on this one, just in the interest of time, and get to some of the Lightroom adjustments. Some of the Lightroom adjustments I would make. So this does a pretty good job. This one's the best one. The only thing, if you can see it, I'm not sure if it comes through on the recording, there's a difference in that you can see a line here where the fabric is different. So I'm going to go an offset line and have it just blend that for me. But like I said, in the interest of time, I would normally go through and probably painstakingly copy textures and do some of those kind of more advanced things, frequency separation, that stuff. But we don't need to do that today. You kind of get the idea. So in the interest of time, well, maybe we're going to do this because this kind of bothers me down here. I want this to look like a curtain, so I don't need this to be perfect, but I would like it to be a little bit better. So let's get rid of some of these. Looks good, looks good. And I'm not using the AI version. This is just the spot removal tool, because if it works, it's faster. Okay. So let's just go with that in the interest of time, let's just go with that. So a couple things I wanted to show you. With these two images, right? The first is very apparent here. The geometry's off. So I like to have it a little straighter. Now in real life, it was just a hanging curtain, but I'd like to have it hanging straight. So that's it, that's all I would do. Now it's straight. The other thing to me, again, I like to have a little bit more light to dark transition, and this is all too light, so I put a linear gradient here, and if it bumped into her, I just subtract her out. And then I can kind of darken this like that. Last thing I'd probably do from a macro adjustment is change the light blue to make it a little darker. It's kind of like that, just to add a little bit more contrast in there. Then one final thing we can play with. The radial gradients is always my friend. I love them. Put this over her face. I rotate it to align with her body. Invert it. And then I'm going to create a very natural kind of radial, just like a spotlight on her. So it looks like a spotlight is on the stage. Love that. Might even cool it down a little bit. Not too much. There we go. That has a very cinematic look. I'm not in love with the wrinkles on the curtain, but I'm not going to go through while we're here and kind of edit those out. But that's something I would probably go back and play with and see what I can edit out. On the other one, so if we go to the other version of this picture, some very similar things. So the first thing we're going to do is straighten it out. Again, not necessarily required. It's sort of a pet peeve, so it's very easy to do. I just use this guided geometry and we're straightened out. So I feel happier about that now. So a couple things I would do, and this is why I do this in Lightroom and not Photoshop or Evoto. Like, I think her hair is a little bit too dark, but I may revisit that decision a few times. But it's pretty easy just to add this mask and have it always be available for me to play with later. So just lighten that up a little bit like that. That's the kind of thing I don't want to bake in. I may come back tomorrow and change my mind, or I may make a new version and change my mind. Now, for the background, I want to darken the background again. You can see if it sort of picked up a lot of her dress. We can mask that out. I'm just manually painting it out real fast. Sometimes you need to be precise, sometimes you don't. In this case, I don't think we do. And I'm going to take out the floor too. So really it's just that curtain, kind of like we do with the other picture. I'm going to darken it a little bit. I'm going to add some cool tone to it, just to kind of make her pop off a little bit more, just like that. That looks great. Same thing with the radial gradient. Inverse that. And I don't think I want to mess with the floor, so I'm going to keep removing that because I like how that looks. Sort of darken down the curtain area. Maybe I'll even brighten the floor to match her. Something like that. And that looks pretty good. Now, again, I also like the post. Um, Here we go down here. Where are we down here? Sort of the post crop vignetting, just to take those corners out. And you're starting to see that I could work this, work this, work this, but you're starting to see how that just contrast, color contrast, lighting contrast is just starting to pop. Now, the one thing I do notice, her dress is a little warm under here. So it doesn't match the rest of the dress. So I'm going to take sort of a very rough selection. I'm going to intersect that with the color. And then I'm going to take that color down almost all the way out. Add some white to it. So actually that dress now I'll show you before, before, after. So you can see in here how warm it was. Maybe we're going to cool it down a little bit. Something like that. Just to make it stand out and look a little bit more connected to the rest of the dress. And then maybe just crop this a little bit. You know, something, depending on what we're going for, something like that. If you like the floor, this might look really good as a 4x5. Usually I do both. You know, so you can kind of play around. But I'm going to pause there in the interest of time. I've kind of consumed a lot of your night already. So that's about what I would do with that one. Okay, so here we are back just to do a quick, just wrap up of the before and after. So I wanted to just show you, so you can see the difference from left to left is the finished product, right was the original. So depending on how much we had to change and how much time we spent, you can see a dramatic difference here. Remember, we cleaned up the hair and the background. So just to show you visually, not sure how much comes through on the video here, but that's a pretty dramatic change in really what was just a couple minutes of edit. Let's take a peek at another one. So this is one we just did, where we have the dress. So you can see now, cleaned up dress, fix the top. If you want to, if it's easier for you to compare, let me just get rid of the crop for a second so you can see them much easier. So now you can see them much easier. Just the cleaned up version, how much more color contrast there is. The yellow in the dress goes away. It just stands out more. So those little finishing touches. Lastly, let's just take a peek at these two. And you can see we go from a very messy background, which was the key thing here, to a very clean. So we go from it was captured relatively clean, but now it's super clean, high contrast, very modern looking monochrome black and white image. The other ones didn't have as dramatic a change because they were pretty good in camera. But just to show you, there you go. You can see a little bit of the pop, the smoothing, the removing of the skin. So it wasn't exaggerated, but just enough to sort of smooth that and bring the eyes out. All right, so if you made it this far, you made it to the end, and I appreciate it. Thank you for sticking with me. Hopefully that was helpful just to give you a flavor of kind of my process all the way from lighting to editing for final image, the workflow in between. So again, there's a million things. If I covered this in a live workshop, that probably would be a half a day. We would have gone through all those things, but we did it here in whatever it was, 45 minutes or so. So I appreciate you making it through to the end. If there's something that didn't make sense, feel free to drop me a comment or an email, and we'll try to get all those answered back to you. If there's something you want to go deeper on, so if there are topics, any of those topics along the way, the actual shooting, editing, workflow, etc., let me know, let Evoto know, and we'll put something together. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day or rest of your night, and happy editing. See ya.